I wanted to share with you guys something that's pretty novel, something that I certainly hadn't heard of until recently, and it's something called synthetic feline interdigital semiochemical, or FIS. And I'm wondering how many of y'all have ever heard of this? Show of hands if you've heard of it. Oh, there's a lady in the orange jacket over there, I see, and Dr. Lister. Okay. So I just wanted to start a little bit by talking about the actual importance of scratching in and of itself. Certainly scratching in cats is an important means of chemical and both visual communication. In domestic cats, it seems that scratching seems to be related to different contexts and certainly different behavioral functions. Scratching is suggested to be used to sharpen claws and also to maintain the system that allows claw extension as well as withdrawal. And scratching is also used for territorial marking. I think we all can kind of appreciate that fact. And they actually do this by depositing chemical signals that are released by their plantar paw pad glands. And they leave that scent behind on the surfaces that they scratch. Scratching is an inborn behavior in cats, and it's actually performed by cats at about 5 weeks in age and older. And just a fun fact for y'all that farm cats on average scratch anywhere between 1 and 6 times a day, but it hasn't actually been documented in the literature in terms of house cats, but we can assume it's somewhat similar. But how many of y'all have furniture that may or may not look like this? And so for us in this room, it's probably not a huge issue. Like, we learn and we certainly appreciate cats instinctively need to scratch, and we're a little bit more willing or a little bit more understanding of this behavior. But for a lot of pet owners, this type of behavior is unacceptable, and it certainly could lead or contribute as a risk factor to shelter relinquishment. So veterinary behaviorists and veterinarians in private practice are becoming increasingly more aware or receiving more consults by disgruntled owners of cats after furniture and things around the house are being destroyed. And so referral to behaviorists for scratching issues are unfortunately not all that uncommon. Certainly second to the problems of inappropriate elimination, destructiveness in the household is a close second. And scratching is also difficult for owners to understand. Many of them don't understand the natural need for cats to scratch. Rather, they think that they're being more purposefully destructive. And so certainly this creates an ethical dilemma, right? We try to implement practices that are questionable in their morality when we're talking about declawing. And then we also look at different alternatives, such as using the feline soft paws as an alternative to declawing. And declawing certainly has created a lot of debate within the veterinary community in terms of what is ethical and what isn't ethical. And the AVMA, to that end, issued a position statement on declawing, which I think it's personally rather weak in the stance that it takes, but it says that declawing of domestic cats should be considered only after attempts have been made to prevent the cat from using its claws destructively, or when its clawing presents a zoonotic risk for its owners. Owners should provide suitable implements for normal scratching behavior. And so we've tried to implement all these different tools in the home for allowing cats to practice this behavior. And so we have the very traditional scratching post that cats can use. We even have faux furniture that is essentially made out of scratching material for cats. You'll note the little tube and the cushions that cats can actually scratch. It's a little bit more higher end. And then we even have, for the more musically inclined cats, we have a turntable made of corrugated cardboard that cats can appear as if they're DJing in the home. And Overstock.com even guides the pet owner in terms of the most appropriate scratching pad that they should consider purchasing. Many of you have probably heard of Feline, and that's a synthetic copy of the facial feline pheromone. And that's used by cats, we think it's used by cats to mark their territory as safe and secure, discourages cats from spraying furniture, walls. Pheromones are chemical substances that are important for both social and sexual communication between members of a species. And certainly we think that feline facial pheromone plays a very important role in feline communication. But in more recent research, and as we evolve in our understanding and we learn more about feline pheromones, many scientists have been identifying another type of pheromone that they call semiochemicals. And those describe the family of chemical mixtures that are used in both intra and interspecies communication. So while the facial feline pheromone was one of the first groups of pheromones to be identified and led to the manufacturing of a synthetic product, it's been being used with more and more success, and it's leading to the discovery of other pheromone-type products. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about this new product that is soon to be on the market here in the US called FELISCRATCH. This was a study that was recently published in 2013 by a research group in France, and they work at the Institute of Research in Semiochemistry and Applied Ethology. And the title of the article is Induction of Scratching Behavior in Cats, the Efficacy of Synthetic Feline Interdigital Semiochemical. And this has actually been looked at since 2009 as a way to prime cats to scratch a particular target, and also to hopefully avoid or prevent them from scratching an unintended target. And when they first studied this back in 2009, the actual trade name of the product was called Scratchylicious. So what is FIS? Well, it stands for Feline Interdigital Semiochemical, and it's a synthetic mixture of fatty acids that are normally present in the sebaceous gland secretions from those plantar palm glands in cats. Semiochemicals and pheromones were first described and identified way back in the 1970s, but the mechanism of action is still yet to be fully elucidated. FIS has been shown in the past and in other smaller pilot studies to increase the frequency of scratching, a scratching post, as compared with something like catnip. So researchers in this study sought to answer the following question. Could a product such as FIS serve as an ethical alternative to scratching furniture to help preserve the relationship between pet and owner, and to also help keep cats out of shelters? So now a little bit about the study design. It's fairly simple. It was a randomized blinded study that used a total of 19 cats. And so 19 cats were enrolled total, and their scratching behavior was examined by introducing them to either a scratching post that had a placebo substance applied, or a scratching post that had FIS applied to it. The number of cats was 19, but there was a total of 12 intact females, 5 intact males, and 2 neutered males. And they range in ages from 1 to 12 years of age. Both the FIS or the placebo was applied to the scratching post 5 minutes prior to each test, and the room was set up as kind of a pseudo-home environment. Each cat served as its own control, so it was termed a crossover study. So each cat was introduced to both the placebo as well as the FIS applied scratching post. And so a total of 38 total trials were recorded by using video. And 2 independent observers analyzed the videos, and they recorded several different aspects of the cat's scratching behavior. So the FIS was applied using a plastic pipette to the scratching posts, and it was applied to these posts in vertical lines to mimic the motion that a cat would make on the post. And a new scratching post was used for every test. Researchers wanted to determine the latency of first scratching, so the length of time it took before the cat started scratching either post, the total duration of scratching, the frequency of scratches themselves, and then some statistical analyses were performed to determine whether or not they were statistically significant and whether or not there was an actual difference between the scratching post with the FIS versus the placebo. This is just a brief product video, and there's no sound to this, and I will translate for you, because again, this product is only available in France. Do you have enough claw marks all over your house? Reproducing scent marks of scratches and imitating lacerations promotes the natural behavior of your cat scratching? consistent with its environment. Then Garfield proceeds to say, I claw where you want me to claw. Here is a video, and this does have sound, so this will go ahead and go. This is a cat actually being introduced to a scratching post on the right. That's the placebo, and then the scratching post on the left with the FIS applied to it.
Okay, so
1, 2, 3.
Uh-oh. Oh boy. So after examining the videos by 2 independent blinded observers and performing some statistical analyses, the scratching post treated with the FIS was scratched more quickly by all of the cats when compared to the scratching post with the placebo. The time to scratching of the FIS post was about half the time that cats took to actually start scratching the placebo post. It's about 50 seconds versus 120 seconds. There were some pretty extensive statistical analyses here that I didn't choose to go into in detail, but just wanted to provide what the relevant findings here. The cats did scratch the FIS post significantly longer, actually over 4 times as long. It's about 80 seconds versus 20 seconds, and that's quite a long time if you think about how long your cats typically scratch a post for. The frequency of scratches themselves were about double the FIS-treated post versus the control post. However, the time to first scratching wasn't found to be statistically significant when analysis was performed, but just looking at it, glancing at the data, it did seem to be positively influenced by the application of the product. So FELISCRATCH is currently manufactured by Biosem in France. It costs about 33 euros a box, which is $45 US. Comes with 10 ampules per box, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. It will be available in the US, according to the researchers of the study, by SIVA Pharmaceuticals by the end of 2014. These are what the ampules look like when you open the box, and each of these have 5 mils in them, and you can use these for multiple applications. The instructions of the product are as followed. So you open the ampule and you go ahead and draw vertical lines, again mimicking those scratch marks on a scratching post that you desire a cat to scratch. You apply them once daily for 7 days, and then you use the remainder of that ampule once every 3 to 4 days. And this product can be used both for cats that have a behavioral issue with scratching things that are unwanted to be scratched, so you can prime them to a new location, or it's for cats that you can introduce that are newly introduced into the home or the facility to, again, kind of prime them to scratch a particular place. And this was a quote that is on the box of the product. I just thought it was interesting and worth sharing is that the manufacturers recognize that most conflicts between cats and their owners are rooted in ignorance of those needs that are not met, rather than an actual feline issue. So just as a conclusion to wrap this up, scratching certainly is a normal way for felines to communicate with one another, and an approach which enables this appropriate behavior redirected in an appropriate location that is tolerated by the owner might serve as an interesting alternative to declawing and other techniques that we use to mitigate this behavior. And perhaps it's a new tool in the toolbox for shelter professionals to use to offer to that potential relinquisher that just is fed up with their cat's destructive scratching behavior.